Bernard here. I hope you're all staying safe and well, and welcome to the Citizen channel and another episode. I think this is episode 5 now of the going out in order. I try and keep in order of the streets around Maine Road. In 1977 the City Council, Manchester City Council, named a number of streets in a new estate in Moss Side after, of course, famous City players. We've had a look at Fred Tilson, we've had a look at Billy Meredith, we've had a look at Tommy Johnson, we've had a even look at Sammy Cookson, but we're probably going to have a look at one of the biggest legends and the biggest names in more ways than one today. When we're going to have a look at this street or this walk. This walk's called Frank Swift Walk, M144JS. Yes, we're going to have a look at a certain gentleman who gives his name to that little walkway. Please, if you're new to the channel, push that subscribe button, push the bell notifications, do city history, city presents, city quizzes, city book clubs, you name it, we do it here. Please check out all my playlists, and you will notice some stuff on film and TV as well. So if you want to rest from football anytime, just have a look at that. That'll be fantastic. And of course, on screen there'll be links to Facebook and Twitter. If you want a friend or follow me on there, I do check every couple of days. I do have a couple of shops on eBay if you can spend time there. I used to have a video shop in the 90s and 2000s, so I still sell some old rare DVDs, some movie posters from that era, 90s and 2000s, some board games on there as well. So if you get a chance to check out those too, if you have any problems, let me know. I can point you in the right direction. All comments very welcome. Of course, I don't think there's many guys out there old enough to remember watching Frank Swift, of course, but I'm sure you've heard tales of him and read things and all that sort of thing. So any comments you want to make, please do so. And if you get a chance, just give us a thumbs up. It's nice to get views, but it's nice to get a thumbs up. Right, there we go. Frank Victor Swift. There you go, Victor. That's not a name that you come across many times nowadays. He was born on Boxing Day. Yes, Boxing Day. He missed out on Christmas Day. 1913, in Blackpool. Yeah, not far from Bloomfield Road. I've spent a few visits there for football and holidays. Yeah, I've had the holidays. I've used when I was younger, and even one of my first sort of holidays with my good lady, well, my ex-good lady. She's not very good now, obviously, but my ex-good lady was at a hotel near Bloomfield Road called the Concord, if you know it. I don't know if it's still there. Probably not there anymore now, but there you go. Yeah, and he would earn extra pocket money doing boat trips for the tourists along the coast there. He was a big lad. He represented Blackpool schoolboys and played for Blackpool Gasworks, where he was obviously worked as a coat keeper, so he played for them. He thought he was a little bit better than that, though, and he applied for trials and was successful in trials and turned out for Fleetwood Town. Yeah, and obviously he sort of had the trial, was successful there. His brother Fred was a keeper as well. I think his brother Fred started at Blackpool. He may have ended up at Bolton, something like that, his brother Fred. So his brother Fred was a pretty good goalkeeper as well. And City, yes, this is where City came into it, really. We just happened to be looking, we were sort of between keepers at the time, if we can say that, and we're looking for a new upcoming keeper. And of course, as is his want, Mr. Swift applied. I've got Miss Bert Troutman on my mind. He comes later. Yeah, he applied. Frank Swift applied to City as well, and obviously got trials there, and he played a few friendlies. Yeah, City let him play a few friendlies, and they took the plunge. They wadded the money like we do now, and we give Fleetwood Town 10 bob. Yeah, 10 shillings, 50p for to buy Frank Swift. Yeah, we gave him 10 bob, and then we did offer to pay for Frank 10 bob a week as well. So hey, we must have been made of money in those days, Manchester City. So with that, he joined Manchester City on the 21st of October 1932. Yeah, I mean, City under new manager then, Wilf Wyle, were beginning to improve, become a bit of a force. And we even got to Wembley, didn't we, that first season? And Frank actually watched City at Wembley. He had to pay to get in, mind. He didn't get a free ticket, as we sadly lost 3-0 to Everton. I mean, he didn't realise at that point in time, 12 months later, to be on the pitch keeping goal, did he? But there you go. Yeah, bad defeat to Everton, and to add insult to injury, having to pay in yourself is a bit much. But there you go. But in 1933, Yeah, City were making a good fist of it in the first division. It was, of course, this season where Frank got his real chance to play for the first team. And obviously, once he got in there was not much that stopped him. England international games stopped him playing for City sometimes, because he used to have internationals on the same day as City football matches and any other club football matches. So that sort of stopped him at some stages. But between that 1933 and 1949, there wasn't many occasions when he wasn't between the sticks for City. He got his league debut on Christmas Day 1933 against Derby County at the baseball ground. Two days previously, City had lost 8-0 at Molineux, so he couldn't do as bad as that, surely. But we lost 4-1, but hey, it was an improvement on 8, wasn't it? So he didn't do as bad as the last guy who took charge in goal. So, it was good enough to play again the next day. That's what they used to do in those days. We whinge about all these games now, but he used to play away against one team and then home games, or home and away, depending which it was, Christmas Day and Boxing Day. So he played against Derby again at Maine Road on the very next day, Boxing Day, and this his birthday. Yeah, his 20th birthday, of course, and he kept a clean sheet to impress over 57,000 fans at Maine Road that day. So it wasn't a bad day overall, birthday and keeping a clean sheet. I think we could go with that. Didn't always go that well for him, of course. I mean, he did let the odd sort of high score in between his into his goal, but that was a good start, wasn't it? I think what impressed the young fans, I've heard anything between his hands having a span of between 11 and 3/4 inches and 14 inches. So anyway, depending obviously whether his hands are cold or warm, I don't know what it is, but it is said that his hand span was that large, and he could easily pick up a ball with one hand. There'd probably be an image showing somewhere with him picking the ball up in one hand. And he was said to have hands like frying pans. There you go, so too bad. It's obviously his immediate popularity, really, with the City fans. He sort of they took to him quite quickly, and that was quite unusual and special, because this was a team at the time packed with a few crowd favourites. We had Sam Cowan, Fred Tilson, Eric Brook, Matt Busby, Alec Hurd, Ernie Toseland, and yet, yes, Frank sort of stuck himself up there with them guys. And he also liked to throw. With having such big hands, he was quite good at throwing the thing as well. I was quite accurate at throwing when I was a keeper, but obviously probably not to Frank's skills. But he was so rather than just kick it all the time, he was left-footed because he had an injury to his right foot when he was a kid. But instead of that, he'd take advantage of quick throws out, and that was quite unusual in keepers at the time. So he did set a sort of phase for other keepers to do a similar sort of thing. Of course, Frank played that season a big part in yet another trip to Wembley, of course, after the disappointment of the year before. And the crowds were flocking to Maine Road to watch City. Of course, we had the record-breaking 84,569 crowd against Stoke City. He played in that one. And it was during that run, a bit sad. He played at Hillsborough in a fifth round game that ended in a 2-2 draw. But a record crowd there, which was, I think, stood for still their record crowd at Hillsborough for Sheffield Wednesday that we drew 2-2 with. Sadly, there was too many people in the ground. It just couldn't take it, and dozens and dozens were injured, and one poor guy was crushed to death against the railings, and I think it affected Frank a little bit as it sort of passed him as he was sort of I think he was in the tunnel at the time. Someone said he was on the pitch and he passed him with the dead bird on the stretcher, but I think he was actually in the tunnel where all the wounded were being and injured were being attended to. So that must have been a horrible thing for him to see. And then obviously to literally go to the sixth round and have that massive crowd at Maine Road. And because at that game he was actually chatting away to the fans. He spilled over to near the post. And obviously Frank was always an amiable guy anyway. He always got on well with the fans. And obviously it must have played on his mind just a little bit to see the massive crowd at Maine Road. But obviously the problem at Maine Road wasn't particularly crushing. It was the fact a lot of people couldn't see what was going on. So it wasn't too bad. Before the final at Wembley, obviously against Portsmouth, Frank was incredibly nervous. I mean, he's only a young guy, don't forget, and he sort of looked at the Portsmouth goalkeeper and saw that he wasn't wearing his gloves. So Frank thought, well, if he's older than me, he must know I'll not wear my gloves. And then he blamed himself then when Portsmouth scored, because it's sort of, if you do, I think there are highlights on YouTube, he did get his hand to it, but it sort of, he actually helped it into the goal, and I think he did blame himself, and obviously he was totally unconsolable at half-time in the dressing room. But fortunately, you say, Frank went on to play a fantastic game. In the second half, we took a 2-1 lead, and it was only Frank's heroics that kept the score at 2-1, to be honest with you. So it was obviously that little sadness at half-time was made up for. And he was panicking a bit as he got to near full-time. He was asking the press guys what time it was, and he actually fainted at the final whistle. He had to be brought round by smelling salts. It totally got to him. The fact he played such a good game overall is unbelievable, really, when he can how nervous he was. But so he did faint, and then obviously the smelling salts revived him. He was able to get his winner's medal from King George V, who actually asked about his welfare. Yeah, he obviously had seen Frank faint on the pitch, and Frank also got a telegram from the King a couple of days later to inquire about his health. So that was a nice touch. Yeah, the Topical Times. So a quote from the Topical Times: "Few players can have risen to the heights so quickly as Manchester City's keeper Frank Swift. Within 4 months of entering league football, Swift appeared at Wembley and collected a cup winner's medal. His own ability and courage helped to put him there. He was but a raw kid from minor football when he came into the City team, but the improvement was noticeable in every game he played until at the end of the season he was cool and finished. He was the cool and finished keeper one associates with a first division club. He's very tall, strong, he is daring to a degree. He times a dive to a nicety. He's saved many a bad situation by this. He's keen-eyed, alert and agile. And now that he has cured a tendency to run out, so he must have been a bit like Edison, must he? Just a tendency to run out. There seems a bright future for this lad." Well, from Fleetwood, they said here, but obviously, as far as I know, he's born in Blackpool. But there you go. Played for Fleetwood, of course. Yeah, Swift continues to be idolised by the fans and featured in all but one game before the games came to an end with the outbreak and World War II beginning. We did play on a little bit into that, but as things grew and the tension and the war actually started to hit home, obviously the league was abandoned. So obviously he did actually only miss one game before that happened, and only one player came near sort of challenging his popularity, and that was the Irish international Peter Doherty, who was bought near the time. And it was sort of Doherty that had spearheaded City's very first league title just a couple of years before war broke out in 1936-37. He sort of helped fire City to victory to win that first title, and of course Frank Swift kept him out at the other end as well. So both players tremendously popular with the fans. We're not sure how they stood with the fans the season after, when, despite the presence of both of those players and some excellent players, City were relegated, obviously. But yeah, so there you go. Mr. Doherty didn't like it. He wanted out of the club. And Frank, to his benefit, just got on with it. He just stayed at the club, so, he accepted it and wanted to get City back up. And obviously, Mr. Doherty was wanted out, but City refused to sell him, so he did have to stay at least till the war. And obviously, he did leave after the war, but obviously under a bit of a dark cloud, to say the least. Frank Swift made more appearances during the war. I mean, he did serve in the armed forces. He didn't see action as such. But he'd obviously guested for City and other teams as well around the country, which was the normal thing to do at those times. In 1946-47, once the leagues came back again and started again, City obviously in the second division then, because of that relegation just before the war broke out, a couple of seasons before the war broke out, would win the second division title, and Frank was obviously big part of getting that title for City, the second division title, under a newly appointed manager, an ex-player, Sam Cowan. He actually kept, in the 46-47 season, he actually kept 17 clean sheets in 35 league appearances, a City record until a certain Alex Williams bettered it in 1985. So there you go. And it was after the war that Swift will be recognised for England and get his first full cap. I mean, he did actually play for England during the war, but obviously this wasn't recognised as official appearances, if you like, so you didn't win caps for the games during the war. He would make 19 appearances and lose only 2 of those games after the war for England, and his contribution was certainly noted by England as he became the first keeper to actually captain the team. Yeah, he did it a couple of times, and he captained the side in a May 1948 game in Turin against Italy. This was to be known possibly as England's best performance outside of winning the 1966 World Cup. And Frank more than anyone, had the game of his life in that one to keep a clean sheet, and he sort of even cited it as being his best game he'd ever had. You know, obviously he'd won that league, he'd won the FA Cup, etc. But he said that was the best game he'd actually played himself. He was that good in Turin that he was actually cheered off the pitch by his fellow English players at the final whistle, just to show just how good he was. City themselves, we were settling back into the First Division. We weren't obviously challenging as such for the title, but we were comfortable back in the First Division under a new manager now, John Thompson. And Frank had, even though he was fairly young, certainly for a keeper, had begun to think about life after football. And before the 48-49 season, he announced it would be his last season. He wanted to retire whilst he was at his best, at his peak, which is quite unusual. I mean, the first game at Maine Road that season was a little embarrassing for him. He was literally putting his gloves and hat in the back of the goal, and obviously the Preston striker had noticed this, and from kickoff, he'd actually scored within 7 seconds, and Frank hadn't actually looked back to see what was going on. So fortunately his blushes were spared, because City actually went on to win that one 3-2. But so it didn't get off to the greatest start, but City had a great season. Frank had a great season. Even better, some great displays, and many thought it was one of his best ever. But Frank was determined to retire, and he said he was going to, and he wasn't going to change his mind. And reluctantly, the next season, though, he did agree to play a handful of games. I think he turned out for 4 games, because City ended up with a keeper crisis at the start of the 49-50 season. So he actually played in another 4 games. And even though he'd had a sort of presentation and had a sort of parade at the end of the season before with his retirement, obviously he did sort of come back out of retirement to play those 4 games. And his last appearance for City was a clean sheet again. So there you go. He started with 1 at Maine Road, and he finished with 1 at Maine Road, with a 0-0 draw with Everton on September the 7th, 1949. City will struggle that season. Yeah, we didn't do very well. We had the arrival of another German-born keeper legend, didn't we, that same season? But unfortunately, we would be relegated. But strangely enough, the thing with Frank wasn't ended there. City actually held on to his registration, so he couldn't actually sign or go anywhere else until 1955. So even that was like 6 years after he'd officially retired from City. But City was so determined that he couldn't play for anybody else, and the fact of this was a certain Matt Busby had been sort of after him to play for United, and Frank had shown a little bit of interest at one stage in playing for United. So I think City sort of did that to keep United away, and a lot of people didn't appreciate what they did. To be honest with you, Frank had changed his mind. He should have been, obviously, with his loyalty and what he'd done for City, it was only right. He could have a choice at where he would have gone. But yeah, just so City, either cleverly or nastily, depending which way you look at it, held on to his registration. But after retiring from football, he didn't really come back into it. He became a well-respected journalist. He became a director of a firm, and then he became a journalist. And fans, young and old, would still flock to get his autograph when he attended matches in a journalistic role. He would still visit Maine Road again. It was very popular there, again, with autograph hunters, etc. And he would watch City both officially and unofficially, as on his guise as a journalist. And he became president of the City Supporters Club. His columns in the News of the World were incredibly popular, just like the guy on the pitch. His columns were popular. People actually bought the News of the World just to read Frank Swift's columns. They were that good. There was some were humorous, some were serious. He sort of knew how to write a story, as well as knew how to keep a good goal. But there you go. Of course, sadly, whilst reporting for the News of the World, he died in the Munich air crash, of course. He was sadly pulled from the wreckage alive, but died before reaching hospital. A tragic end to a fantastic life. Many opposing strikers testified Frank was the best keeper they'd ever played against. That included someone like Tom Finney, the legendary English player. As a man and a keeper, he was something special, there's no doubt about that. Alongside the likes of Peter Shilton and Gordon Banks, he's respected as one of the best ever England goalkeepers. Say he died in that Munich air crash on the 6th of February 1958. His career for City spanned, well, some people say 376 official appearances without the war games, etc. Some say 375, so let's go 376. And 133 or so wartime games for City. And he made other appearances for other clubs as well, at least 5 or 6 other teams he made guest appearances for in the war. In 1998, he was listed as one of the Football League's 100 legends, alongside other City players, Colin Bell, Billy Meredith and Bert Troutman. Yes, I would get to him at some stage, and he was inducted into the Manchester City Hall of Fame in 2004. There you go, Frank Victor Swift. There you go. Hope you enjoyed that anyway. Yeah, thanks for joining me. What an incredible guy. A truly larger-than-life footballing legend, and certainly one of the many incredible keepers City have had in our history. But what a guy by all accounts. And